The red wave that swept Donald Trump into office stopped dead at the blue shore of California. Even Orange County, bedrock of conservatism, went for Clinton over Trump. Is California on the cutting edge or out in left field? Well, here to discuss that and to make sense of a wild election, Norberto Santana of the investigative news site Voice of OC and Will Swaim of the California Policy Center. I'll also ask Norberto about his legal battle with OC Supervisor Todd Spitzer. All that coming up right now on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by 5 Point. 5 Point is an independent real estate development company with assets under management across California. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
Chapman University, with its Center for Science and Technology, under construction in Orange, California, is a proud sponsor of Inside OC.
Hi, I'm Rick Reiff. Welcome to Inside OC. Well, I'm talking with Norberto Santana and Will Swaim. Gentlemen, good to have you on.
Good to be here.
So we have a lot of election stuff to cover. But before we get into that, Norberto, tell us a little bit about this dust-up that you're having with Supervisor Todd Spitzer. I guess to boil it down, you want some county records and he wants you deposed, okay? So that's kind of what's going on. Let me just set up and then feel free to, correct or whatever. But just so people know what we're talking about, what's the reason there's been this legal dispute? It all stems from an incident that occurred on Good Friday in April of 2015. Todd goes in by himself into a Wahoo's restaurant in Tustin. And this man who, by all accounts, was behaving rather erratically, might be some mental issues involved, is trying to engage Todd, wants to talk to him about the Bible and all that. And erratic enough, and Todd was concerned enough that he calls 911. He goes outside into the parking lot to his car, and he gets handcuffs and a gun. Now, he has been trained as a deputy, a reserve Los Angeles City police deputy and all that, and he's got all the, permits to carry guns and all that. So he's a lawman when he wants to be a lawman. All right, so he comes back in, and some of the details are a little fuzzy, but what winds up happening is that Todd handcuffs this guy, never exposes his weapon, but handcuffs the guy, and then the police come. No charges are filed either way. But it does kind of raise an issue about a supervisor, kind of making a citizen's arrest, if you will. And so take it from there. You wanted to, what is it that the Voice of OC wanted about this incident?
Well, I mean, we looking at an incident like this, an elected official who forcibly detains a person and then that person is let go, we felt as reporters that we had to do everything that we knew to do to ask for all sorts of different records to be able to have an independent way to cast judgment or be able to hold this elected official accountable. So we asked for a series of emails between Supervisor Spitzer and County Public Information Officer about the incident, just to basically try to make sure that we've looked at every document we can to do our job on behalf of the public. And
the county's response to that is that this is privileged information. You do not have a right to these records, right? So then, what do you, and you're arguing there's a compelling public interest.
Well, in our argument in court, so as you said, we've asked for these. A reporter who works for me, working on a story on this, went and asked for these records. The county denied those records, saying that any email exchange between an elected official and a county public information officer is not covered by the California Public Records Act because it's deliberative process, something that we believe, our attorneys believe, is an incorrect reading of the law. And so we went to court to enforce our rights.
Right. In fact, if you read that section of the Public Records Act, it says that preliminary drafts, notes, memos, and there's been other case law to say emails are also part of that, are public records and must be disclosed unless the public interest in withholding those records and withholding them clearly outweighs the interest in disclosure. Most folks might say that that test hasn't been met. In other words, what is the compelling reason not to disclose? There is another thing that Todd has cited, or that not Todd, but the county has cited in its filings, which is the deliberative process privilege that if something would impair the ability of government to perform its function, you can withhold it. But again, I'm not sure that that standard's met.
But let me provide context for my devil's advocacy, which is they ought to turn these records over. There are records. The county's going to argue, if it's smart, that the conversations between a public information officer and any official is part of a process that really has to be kind of wide open. And you have to have this full exchange of information and detail that maybe shouldn't go out into the public.
Right.
That's the argument they're going to make, and I'm still going to say you're working the taxpayer's dime. It's all transparency.
Well, let's hear the county's argument here. And I should say I invited Supervisor Spitzer to come on this show or to provide a statement about this case. Now, he declined, saying that the only reason he's declining is because it's currently in litigation, and if it were, he'll be happy to come on and talk after the litigation is over. However, his office did provide me a statement from Orange County Counsel Leon Page, and here I think is kind of the gist of the Spitzer County argument as to why, Norberto, they wanted to pose you. It says, the voice of OC argues that the public has an interest in disclosure of the emails and pre-decisional draft statement about the Wahoos incident because Supervisor Spitzer allegedly pressured the Orange County Register to correct its earlier misleading reporting of the story. We contend that the voice of OC's story about Spitzer using his influence was entirely manufactured by Santana, who prodded and encouraged Spitzer to call the Register to change its story and then failed to disclose that to the public. Spitzer only reached out to the Register at Santana's direction and pursuant to Santana's advice, which was outside the scope of Santana's news gathering activities. So you're the mastermind of this, Norberto. Explain what, what's going on.
Does Todd Spitzer also call you Dad?
Right. I mean, look, the basic is this. This odd conspiracy theory that they have cooked up is not only inaccurate, it's irrelevant to the question in front of the court. The question in front of the court is very simple. Does the California Public Records Act allow us as citizens, us as reporters, to see unfettered email communication between an elected official and a county public worker paid for by our tax dollars? Now, look, I get it. No elected official likes to see their email traffic out in public. I mean, certainly it didn't go well for Hillary Clinton to have that happen. So I get it. However, there's a small wrinkle here, which is we are in charge of the government. If you look at, and I mean, again, the people, this is what the preamble to our Brown Act, which ensures our access to this state, says it all, which is the people of this state do not yield their sovereignty to the agencies which serve them. The people, in delegating authority, do not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for them to know. The people insist on remaining informed so that they may retain control over the instruments they have created. That's law. That's what our legislature put in. I think the intent there is pretty clear.
Right. But as you know, there are carve-outs, and Todd's looking for a carve-out here, but while he does not want to part with his emails, he seems willing to part with his text messages, and he does in the county's legal complaint. There's that exchange between you and him where he says he's texting to you, I need your guidance. Register updated story to include Castellano coming back at me. Is that good enough? In other words, he's saying that you said he had to get this correction from the Register, and then you text back, let me check on the road. Yet that was the main key missing fact. You should be good. Call you at 1:30. So 1:30 p.m. So what was that about? In other words, he's saying, were you trying to be helpful with Todd? Were you giving him advice? What was going on here?
The reality of it is it has nothing to do with the legal question in front of the court.
Okay,
period.
But I'm saying here, Will, maybe you can weigh in because maybe. You don't want to go there too deeply. As I was reading, I was thinking, gee, there's been a lot of times I've talked to somebody I was writing about and maybe going to write about them negatively, but you're trying to be frank with them. You're trying to be honest. They might ask you for advice. You're kind of swapping. I mean, it's sort of how anybody either does politics or writes a story. You're exchanging information. There's a back and forth on ideas. Has Todd kind of blown the whole lid off of that?
Absolutely. Well, I don't know if he's blown the lid off it. He's acted like, I would argue that the relationship between a reporter and the person they're interviewing is an adult relationship. And everybody goes into it, almost everybody goes into it, unless it's not an adult relationship, which we'll come to in a moment. Everybody goes into it with their eyes wide open. If Todd wanted to ask a reporter for his advice and the reporter wanted to give him some advice and still write the story he was going to write, he's allowed to do that. Todd Spitzer's a big boy. He's been in the world for a while. He understands who Norberto is. I don't understand that. This message they put out that it's this guy's fault that Todd Spitzer did and said the things he did is remarkable to me, because it really acknowledges this man's not ready to play in the adult world. It's terrifying to me. They should be ashamed of their comment on this. Like, that's really terrible for Todd.
So what happens? You guys you're still in court.
We go to court on November 29th, so it'll be exciting to see how our local courts operate. And I'm sure that we'll see those records at some point. And I mean, at this point, it should be very interesting to see what's in those emails that they are fighting so hard and so frankly, questionably, with our tax dollars. Because remember, too, when we get those emails, they will be sanctioned by the court. So that, unfortunately, the taxpayers will pay for Mr. Spitzer's adventure. And this just inability to answer a simple question.
Yeah. So finally, before we move off this and get into the elections, you mentioned the adult factor, I think, or, and I guess, Todd wants to be the top law enforcement officer in this county. There's a little question that he plans on running at some point for district attorney. I guess in a way, politicians going after reporters is not an unpopular thing nowadays. Clearly we now have a president-elect who is pretty critical of the press. So will this hurt Todd in the long run politically?
I think one of the challenges of local elections, including even elections for the DA, is that the public doesn't really understand a whole lot of this. I would imagine that most of the people who are listening to us right now have very little idea of what we're talking about, despite our best efforts to background them. That's number one. Number two, my own position is, of course, this is a terrible thing for Todd Spitzer to have done. It does not ingratiate him to the media, who already sort of look at him skeptically. Number three, I got to hand it to Norberto, because, in the interest of full disclosure, which I'll do on his part, Norberto's funding comes a lot from organized labor and people who are sympathetic to organized labor. Todd Spitzer is a huge friend of cops, firefighters, Orange County Employees Association, the very people who support Norberto's Voice of OC. And yet Norberto's going after this guy really aggressively, the way that he should. I think that's, you don't see a whole lot of that kind of independence in the media often.
Okay, and on that we will go, again, this all stems from a citizen's arrest made by a supervisor at a restaurant, and maybe someday we'll learn a little more about exactly what went down there. Okay, the election, Norberto, let's start with you. As we know, Trump carried the nation, but not California. Right. If you take California out of the equation, Trump won the election by more than 2 million votes. Once you throw California in there, he lost by 500,000 votes. So. Right. California zigged and the rest of the country zagged. What do you make of it?
Well, I mean, obviously, California is a very different place than the rest of the United States. I mean, we're a very modern place where immigration, frankly, is a complex part of our fabric here. I think that some of these things that having to do with our relationships with Mexico, which again is two hours away, it's a much more complex endeavor. And I think that obviously there was some reluctance here to move quickly on, change gears, let's say, quickly on something like immigration. There are a lot of communities in places like Santa Ana and Anaheim that are beyond terrified about the instability of what's just been included. I'd like to almost say other employers are also somewhat nervous
about.
And
I do want to get back, and I do want to discuss at some length the ramifications about that. But well, first, again, to everything Norberto said, yes, but Orange County, Orange County went for Hillary Clinton. Now you have to go all the way back to 1936, FDR, the depths of the Depression. Even by 1940, they were voting again in Orange County for Wendell Willkie or whoever it was that was running that year. So I'm saying that, what's going on?
Well, I think this is a race. This is not the race on which to judge California or Orange County or the nation's politics. We all, in the course of the last year, ran into Republicans who despised Trump, Democrats who hated Clinton. and vice versa, right? So people were voting for a whole host of reasons. I agree with Norberto that a lot of people were just terrified by Trump. I think, frankly, I ran into loads of Republicans in Orange County who despised Trump, probably didn't vote for Hillary, but didn't vote for anybody in that top slot.
Might an explanation, because in the rest of the races, it's not like Orange County went blue. I mean, there were, it was pretty much, it adhered to its usual line.
Yeah.
Is it just the demographics of Orange County that Trump won because of the white, blue-collar vote? We don't have that much blue collar in Orange County. We have a lot of white collar, and we have a lot of wealthy, Republicans, a lot of whom, let's face it, they were the establishment. They didn't go for Trump. Does that explain what happened?
Yeah, of course it does. And we saw that in working class areas of Orange County that are more immigrant, I would say North Orange County, you saw Republican candidates working very hard to distance themselves from Trump. And Democrats, sending out mail at the last minute saying, this Republican candidate loves Donald Trump, even though, everybody's running away from him in Orange County. We're a very libertarian place, I think, on the Republican side. And I think on the Democratic side, the anti-immigrant message just was way too powerful to overcome.
Yeah, so Norberto, it seems to me there are two things in particular to watch for as far as what will this mean for California. Maybe 4 words. Covered California, mass deportations. Covered California, of course, is California's version of Obamacare. Right. Obamacare is going to be changed dramatically, it would appear, and yet California's been relatively happy with its covered California. What's going to happen to that? And are we going to see mass deportations?
Well, I mean, I think, again, the other day we were talking about this earlier, the head of the legislature was sending out a pretty strident statement of saying California will begin to reevaluate its relationship with the federal government on a host of levels. I mean, on the environment, we couldn't be more far apart.
But what's California going to do? I'm saying the federal government may well say, we're going to reassess California. California, we're not going to send you the $20 billion a year for covered California. We're not going to send you money if you have sanctuary cities. It would seem to me the leverage is more with the feds than with California.
I don't think so, because California is a net exporter of tax dollars to the Fed, right? There are whole states that...
Are we going to withhold our tax dollars?
I think, there are things that people have predicted about the rise of Donald Trump or the rise of Hillary Clinton that predicted not secession, but something close to a very polite, or impolite, but civil war. And I could imagine California lawmakers, especially those on the left, who will really hate Trump so much that they will set up these kinds of financial barriers. Trump has Chris Christie on his side, who's threatened to go after medical marijuana and recreational marijuana.
That's another issue.
That's not going to fly well over here.
Let's make it six words. Medical marijuana, legal marijuana is another one.
But now remember, one bedrock concept of our country is called states' rights.
Yep.
And so we do have local control and how we interact.
California adhering to states' rights. That's a new one.
Well, there was a great podcaster on the left who said, for the first time, I understand the Second Amendment and states' rights. Yeah.
All right. Let's and that's the we're kind of discussing now or painting the negative picture. Let's say the downside of what could happen. I do note that some of the immediate reactions of state leaders, Democratic state leaders in California, very defiant. We're going to fight. We're not going to settle for this. In contrast to President Obama, for example, who's been trying to strike a rather conciliatory tone, which I would suggest, again, just shows how far California is different than the rest of the country. But how about on the positive side? Turns out he's not going to, this mass deportation will
He's already walking that back.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that maybe the mass deportation, I'm just speculating here, really becomes a very heavy crackdown on gangs. And that it's really what we're going to go after. They say they're going to be going after the illegals or going after the gangs.
Trump has already certainly said this in an interview, I think it was on 60 Minutes, where he said, we're going to go after the hardened criminals first. That makes sense.
And that's pretty much what Obama has been doing for the last 8 years, is going after. So he's going to just redouble that.
Yeah.
And he's not going to build a great wall. He's going to build a really great fence in places.
I wanted to ask somebody, can you define the difference between a wall and a fence for me? Is one taller? I honestly wanted it. Like I was expecting an architectural
I'd say one is brick and one is wire. I thought that's the...
Well, but I mean, again, and I think what Donald Trump is doing is beginning to adjust to the realities that he confronts. I think everybody talked about how in awe he was when he sat down with Obama and understood the implications of the office that he has now taken. Things like deportations, you're right. You're probably going to see a ratcheting up of jailhouse checks, meaning that anybody who ends up in a jail, whether for a DUI, riding a bike down the wrong way of the street, I mean, whatever it may be, you're probably going to have your immigration status checked. Will we go beyond that? Who knows? But it doesn't seem that he's indicating that we're heading in that direction. So you see already almost a moderating of his positions almost immediately. Covered Obamacare. He's saying that some aspects of it may remain and some will change.
And frankly, depending on how he goes about it, there's a lot of Democrats who would be more than happy to change those things that they don't like about it. So Norberto, let's get a little more local, though. Let's talk about some of the local elections. In particular in Anaheim. Tell us what went on. Disney really putting a lot of money in, trying to hide. They were sort of trying to hide where the money was coming from. But again, good reporting showed the huge amounts Disney was pouring in the council races in Anaheim. What was that all about?
Our reporter, just plus Nick Gerda, did a great job of, again, doing what basic reporters are supposed to do. Go look at the raw documents rather than what someone tells you. So he went and did that and found $1 million almost of Disney steering through a bunch of different PACs. I remember one guy, Mark Lopez, a Republican Hispanic, got hit for being too left and got hit for being too right, all from Disney. If anything, I think the tale of this campaign is, despite internet, despite newspapers, despite everything, mail is apparently what moves voters. You see it in Anaheim, you saw it in Santa Ana, a police takeover, a police union takeover of the city. Just mail apparently works with people. So anyway, that is the stunning one. In Anaheim, it's very clear Disney is afraid of losing control of that city council, and they have done what they needed to, some would argue appropriately so as a large business in town, to stay involved in their civics. Going against them is a different thing.
The issue was the mayor, who is Mayor Tom Tate, who has been a burr in the side of Disney.
Right.
He did not get he got one seat, so now there's like 2 seats. They're outvoted 3 to 2.
Right. So we're going to continue to have an argument about crony capitalism in Anaheim for the foreseeable future. And as you see, money wins elections.
Yeah.
I'm shocked. What was interesting to me was, a couple of phenomena. One is school bond measures that failed, especially up in Brea, and then far south in Capistrano, Capo Unified School District. You saw 2 school bonds, and the one down in Capo was $900 million. If you throw in the interest payments, it was like 1.5 almost, somewhere between 1.5 and 3, I'm sorry, 1.5 and 2 billion with a B dollars. Massive, massive bond. And it failed overwhelmingly. And this is not just anti-tax stuff. This is, I think, the rise of legitimate concern about the public spending. If you go and you look at the pension programs for not so much the teachers, I think, which people generally love, but the administrators, huge questions there. Certainly up in Brea, you had this interesting feature where the school bond measure comes 6 months after the school declares all of its schools are great and exemplary in their facilities. You get a school bond measure to fix their deplorable schools.
Yeah, and your baby, the one that you were writing about in Fountain Valley. Or Stanton.
Yeah.
Stanton. Tell us the Stanton.
Well, the Stanton,
it passed.
The sales tax, the local sales tax stayed. There was a repeal effort on the ballot. The repeal lost. Now they got term limits in on the same deal, so it's kind of interesting. We don't like the officials who gave us a tax increase, but we're going to keep the tax increase. And I think there's a real common thread here throughout North Orange County. If you use the words public safety in connection with any tax increase, people vote for it. Right. Yeah. They're like terrified. All you got to do is say your house will be on fire, your parents will be raped, and if
and that's it. I will point out one place where Orange County departed from the rest of the state: plastic bags. Orange County wants its plastic bags. Unfortunately, it has lost its plastic bags. There will be no more of those disposable plastic bags. Okay. And a final note. Former UC Irvine Chancellor Ralph Cicerone, a renowned scientist who guided the university into the 21st century, has passed away at age 73. He was founding chair of the university's pioneering climate change department, and he oversaw a lot of campus expansion. He left UCI to run the prestigious National Academy of Sciences in Washington, D.C. Now, obituaries nationwide noted his academic achievements, but there was a lot more to Ralph. For one thing, he was a heck of an athlete. In high school, he once made 70 straight free throws in practice, and many years later, I saw him sink 28 straight at a UCI fundraiser. He was captain of his college baseball team, and he was the Anteaters' biggest fan. He even traveled from the East Coast to Omaha to cheer them on in the College World Series, and UCI's ballpark is named after him. I can also attest to his commitment to this community, because if it wasn't for Ralph Cicerone, I may not be doing this show. You see, when I was trying to start up Inside OC some 15 years ago, it was hard finding a sponsor to get the show going. Then I had lunch with Ralph. It was the easiest sell I ever made. He immediately got what the show would mean to Orange County and to his university. And I recall how gracious he was, saying he had no problem whatsoever with other academic institutions getting exposure on the show as well. Well, with UCI aboard, other sponsors quickly followed. Now, on Ralph's long list of accomplishments, this is no big deal, but it has meant a lot to me. And if you like this show, you can thank Ralph too. Our condolences to Ralph's wife, Carol, a UCI professor emeritus, and the rest of the Cicerone family. So that's it for now. Thanks again to my guests, Norberto Santana and Will Swaim. You can watch this show and past shows by going to pbssocal.org or rickreiff.com. You can also catch our shows and our post-show open mic chatter on YouTube. And follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by 5 Point. 5 Point is an independent real estate development company with assets under management across California. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
Chapman University, with its Center for Science and Technology, under construction in Orange, California, is a proud sponsor of Inside OC.